U.S. military just seized the Strait of Hormuz. Live. Right now. This is not a drill. For the first time in modern history, American forces control the most valuable choke point on Earth. 1/5 of the world's oil passes through this single stretch of water. And tonight, it belongs to the United States Navy. Iran is watching. China is watching. The entire global economy is watching. What happens in the next 60 minutes could change the price of oil, the strength of the dollar, and the balance of power in the Middle East. We have the imagery. We have the positions. We have the numbers. And we are about to walk through all of it together. Stay with us, because what you're about to see changes everything. Welcome back, everyone, to the Siege War. Now, before we dive into tonight's breakdown, if you've been with us for a while, you already know what to do. But if this is your first time here, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button. It genuinely helps us keep doing this work, keep tracking these situations for you, night after night. Think of it like leaving a porch light on. It doesn't cost you anything, but it means the world to us. And while you're settling in, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? We've got viewers from every corner of the globe, and we love seeing just how far this reaches. All right, let's get into it. The story begins with a single announcement. Late in the evening, U.S. Central Command confirmed a major shift in the Strait of Hormuz. For weeks, American ships had been blocking traffic in and out of the strait. Now, officials say control has moved to a new level. They are calling it a full seizure of the waterway. This is the narrowest, most important oil route on the planet. Every day, millions of barrels of oil pass through this single channel. Ships from Saudi Arabia, Iraq, the UAE, and Iran itself all depend on this route. Analysts say this moment did not happen overnight. It followed months of rising tension. The blockade started small, a few warships rotating in and out, watching, waiting, holding the line. Officials described it simply. They said American forces would keep ships moving in and out for as long as needed. No end date, no timeline, just steady pressure. Over time, that pressure grew. More ships arrived. More aircraft launched from carriers nearby. Reconnaissance flights increased. And slowly, the posture changed from watching the strait to controlling it. Military analysts explain this shift matters for one big reason. Whoever controls Hormuz controls the flow of global energy. It is one of the most sensitive choke points in the world. Close it, or control it, and oil prices can shift overnight. This is why every move here gets studied so closely. By traders, by governments, by ordinary people who fill up their gas tanks and don't even realize why prices just changed. Officials have pointed to specific numbers to explain the scale of this operation. Tens of thousands of sailors and Marines have been involved across the deployment. Aircraft carriers have stayed at sea for hundreds of days straight. Thousands of flight operations have launched from their decks. This is not a small patrol. It is one of the largest sustained naval operations of the past decade. Iran, for its part, has continued to reject the idea that any single country can control the strait. Iranian officials have said the waterway remains under their watch, guarded by their own forces. They argue no tanker should pass without their approval. That argument now stands directly opposite the American position. Two competing claims over the same stretch of water, and no clear resolution in sight. Meanwhile, energy officials have tried to explain what this means for global oil supply. Some report that daily flow through the strait has dropped compared to levels seen before tensions began. Other routes, like pipelines, have picked up some of the difference, but experts agree nothing fully replaces Hormuz. There simply isn't another route that can carry the same volume, the same way, at the same cost. This is what makes the situation so delicate. It is not just a military standoff, it is an economic pressure point that touches nearly every country on Earth. As the story develops, one thing becomes clear. This did not start as a sudden move. It built up piece by piece, decision by decision, until the moment officials felt ready to call it what it now is, a seizure. Not a blockade, not a patrol, full control. And with that control comes responsibility, risk, and the attention of the entire world. What happens next depends on how Iran responds, how markets react, and how long the United States is willing and able to hold this position. That is where the story turns next. The next part of the story moves to the ships, the planes, and the people making this operation possible. Behind every headline about controlling the strait, there is a massive military machine keeping it running. At the center of it all sits a single aircraft carrier. It has stayed at sea for well over 250 days straight. Officials call this one of the longest deployments in recent memory. Thousands of sailors have lived aboard that ship, eating, sleeping, working, all while staying ready for anything. Around the carrier sits what the Navy calls a strike group, destroyers, cruisers, support ships, all moving together, all protecting the center of the formation. This is not a single ship holding the strait. It is an entire floating city built for one purpose: presence and power. From the deck of that carrier, fighter jets launch day and night. Officials report tens of thousands of individual flight operations since the deployment began. Some jets fly patrol missions, watching the water below. Others carry precision weapons, ready if needed. New aircraft have also joined the mix. Stealth fighters, capable of taking off from smaller assault ships nearby. Support helicopters, moving supplies and personnel between vessels. Refueling aircraft, keeping fighters in the air longer without needing to land. Together, this creates a layered system: sea, air, and surveillance, all working at once. On top of this, officials have announced something new: a multinational task force built around drone technology. The idea is simple. Instead of relying only on manned aircraft, the coalition adds unmanned systems into the mix. These drones can patrol longer, fly closer to risk zones, and reduce danger to human pilots. Officials say this task force will bring multiple countries together, combining resources to expand coverage across the region. Now, the story turns to the other side of this standoff: Iran. For years, Iran has built up what analysts call an asymmetric strategy. Instead of matching the United States ship for ship, Iran leans on smaller, faster, and cheaper tools. Fast attack boats, capable of swarming larger vessels, sea mines, hidden and hard to detect, shore-based missiles, aimed at controlling the narrowest parts of the strait, and drones of their own, smaller, simpler, but still a threat. Analysts note Iran does not have the naval strength to challenge the United States directly. There is no large fleet, no carrier group, no matching air power. But that has never been Iran's approach, and their strategy relies on disruption, not direct confrontation. A single mine, a single drone strike on a tanker can cause outsized fear and market reaction, even without major combat. This is why officials continue watching Iran's smaller assets so closely. Satellite imagery has shown continued activity at military sites across the country. Some locations show signs of new construction. Others show equipment being moved or partially hidden underground. Analysts studying this imagery point to patterns: excavated earth, reinforced entrances, structures built into hillsides. These are signs consistent with efforts to protect military assets from future strikes. At the same time, officials have noted growing reports of internal strain within Iran's military structure. Some sources describe pay issues, reduced morale, and a rise in individuals leaving their posts. If accurate, this could affect how much resistance Iran is actually capable of mounting. Even with all their equipment, a military only functions if the people inside it remain committed. So now two very different forces sit on opposite sides of the same waterway. One, massive, layered, and built for sustained presence. The other, smaller, harder to detect, and built for sudden disruption. Officials say this is exactly why the situation remains so unpredictable. It is not simply about who has more ships. It is about who can hold their position longer, and who might make the first move. That question sets up everything that happens next. The story now shifts away from ships and weapons, and moves towards something that touches every single person on the planet: money, energy, the price of everyday life. Because when a choke point like this changes hands, the effects don't stay in the water. They travel through pipelines, through shipping routes, through gas stations thousands of miles away. Officials tracking energy flow say the numbers tell their own story. Before tensions began, close to 20 million barrels of oil moved through the strait every single day. That number has fallen sharply since the standoff started. Some reports now place daily flow closer to 9 million barrels, less than half of what once passed through without question. That is not a small shift. That is a fundamental change in how the world's oil moves. Energy officials have pointed to alternative routes as a partial solution. Pipelines running through other parts of the region have picked up some of the difference. But experts are quick to explain a hard truth. No pipeline, no alternate route, can fully replace what the strait provides. The volume is too large, the infrastructure elsewhere too limited. This is why, even with backup routes running at full capacity, the world still feels the squeeze. Markets have reacted in their own way. Oil prices spiked sharply when tensions first escalated. Since then, prices have settled somewhat, but traders describe the situation as fragile. One incident, one disruption, could send prices climbing again within hours. Shipping companies have felt this pressure directly. Insurance costs for vessels passing anywhere near the region have risen. Some carriers have chosen to reroute entirely, adding days and expense to their journeys. Others have paused operations in the area altogether, unwilling to risk their ships or crews. This creates a ripple effect that reaches far beyond the Middle East. Countries that rely heavily on imported oil now face higher costs for fuel, transportation, and manufacturing. Industries connected to shipping, from electronics to food supply, begin feeling delays and price increases. Everyday consumers, thousands of miles from the strait, may notice it first at the gas pump. Then slowly, in the price of goods that depend on shipping and fuel to reach store shelves. Officials studying this situation describe it as a pressure test for the global economy, a test of how much disruption the system can absorb before serious cracks appear. So far, most economies have adapted, buying more from alternative suppliers, increasing use of pipeline routes, drawing from stored reserves when needed. But analysts warn this adaptation has limits. If the standoff continues for months rather than weeks, those alternative systems may struggle to keep up. There is also a deeper concern connected to money and power. Analysts note that when nations profit heavily from oil and energy resources, that revenue often funds far more than everyday government operations. It can fund military expansion, equipment, infrastructure. This is part of why control over this specific waterway carries weight far beyond fuel prices. It connects directly to how much capability a nation can build over time. Some economists argue that maintaining pressure at this choke point isn't only a military strategy. It may also be viewed as an economic one. Limiting revenue flow, even temporarily, can limit how quickly military capability grows on the other side. Whether that is the primary goal or simply a side effect remains unclear. But the connection between energy revenue and long-term military strength is one analysts continue to point back to. As this economic picture develops, one thing becomes increasingly clear. Control over Hormuz is not just about geography. It's about leverage. Leverage over prices, leverage over supply chains, leverage over how much capability certain nations can build going forward. And because so many countries, industries, and everyday households depend on stability here, the pressure to resolve this situation, one way or another, continues to grow. Which raises the next major question in this story. How does the rest of the world respond? Diplomatically, politically, and on the world stage where alliances, rivalries, and public statements now carry more weight than ever, that is where the story turns next. The final part of this story moves beyond ships, beyond oil prices, and into something harder to measure, the reaction of the world. Because when a choke point this important changes hands, it doesn't just affect trade. It forces every major power to respond, to calculate, and to decide what comes next. Iran's government has remained firm in its public position. Officials there continue to state that the strait remains under their oversight, regardless of what naval forces are present in the water. They argue that no vessel should pass without their approval, a claim that stands in direct contrast to the current American position. This creates two competing versions of reality existing in the very same stretch of water. One side says control has shifted. The other side says nothing has changed at all. Analysts note this kind of disagreement rarely resolves through statements alone. It tends to resolve through actions, through what actually happens on the water, day after day. Regional neighbors have responded with caution. Gulf nations, many of which rely on this same strait for their own oil exports, have largely avoided taking a public side. Their economies depend on stability here just as much as anyone else's. A prolonged standoff threatens their trade routes too, regardless of which flag controls the water. Further from the region, larger global powers are watching closely as well. China, one of the largest importers of oil passing through this corridor, has a direct interest in how this situation unfolds. Any disruption to flow affects their energy supply chain directly. Russia, too, continues monitoring developments, given its own complex relationship with both Iran and global energy markets. Neither country has taken direct military action, but analysts say their economic and diplomatic responses will likely shape how long this standoff continues. International shipping organizations have also raised concerns. Groups representing global trade have called for stability, warning that prolonged tension in the strait threatens supply chains far beyond the region. Some organizations have urged for diplomatic dialogue, hoping to avoid further escalation. Still, on the ground and on the water, the standoff continues. Analysts point to a few key indicators worth watching closely in the weeks ahead. First, internal stability within Iran's own military and political structure. Reports of strain, reduced resources, and internal disagreement could shape how much resistance Iran is actually willing or able to mount. Second, the durability of the American position. Sustaining a deployment this large for this long requires enormous resources, rotation of personnel, and continued political will back home. Third, the possibility of a single incident escalating the entire situation. A mine, a drone strike, a miscalculation by either side. Any of these could shift the standoff from tense to active conflict within hours. At the same time, analysts note the possibility of a different outcome entirely. Diplomatic negotiation. Some officials suggest that economic pressure, sustained over time, could eventually push toward talks rather than further confrontation. History in this region shows that standoffs like this can end multiple ways. Some fade slowly as pressure forces a negotiated settlement. Others escalate suddenly, triggered by a single event that shifts everything. As this story stands right now, no one, not analysts, not officials, not even those directly involved, can say for certain which direction this leads. What remains clear is this: the Strait of Hormuz is no longer simply a waterway. It has become a symbol of military power, of economic leverage, and of how fragile global stability can be when so much depends on a single narrow stretch of water. For now, ships continue moving warily through those waters. Militaries on both sides remain positioned, watching, waiting, and the world continues to feel the effects of a standoff that shows no clear sign of ending soon. That is where this story stands, for now.